Hey guys, welcome back to the Enthusiast Mechanic. So today we're working on a Chevy Malibu and we are going to be doing a trans service. So where I like to start these off is basically right up top on the transmission. We are essentially in the engine bay, close to the coolant reservoir and where the brake booster is. And if you look straight down, you will see a cap. So what we're gonna do here is basically unscrew the cap like so. Now the cap comes off and that's your trans fill. The reason why we were removing this first is so we can get some air inside the transmission so we can drop most of the fluid out. So let's go ahead and begin. Now that we got that part done, we're gonna lift up the car and start removing the pan. Okay guys, welcome back. So we are underneath the car and set up. So we're gonna be dropping the transmission pan, which is this guy right here. First things first, we got this brace in the way. Now you could get this off without removing the brace. I just like to remove it. It doesn't take too much. So we're just going to go ahead, get this out of our way. And now that we have that, we're going to be doing the 8mm bolts that are around the transmission pan. Basically, I use tools like my Milwaukee 1/4-inch impact here to take them off. Now, if you guys notice, as I'm taking them off, it's gonna start leaking down. So you don't want to remove all the bolts on this transmission. Now I have my catch pan underneath here, so it's gonna catch all of the fluid. So what we're gonna do here is basically slowly loosen most of these. And like I said, we're not gonna remove all of them because we want the transmission to level out and drip most of the fluid out. So that way we don't make a huge mess. If you were to remove this whole pan without letting this residual fluid flow out, what'll happen is you'll wind up getting a big mess all over you and all over your shop floor. And well, guys, I'm pretty lazy. I don't like to clean up a lot, so I will pretty much not be making a mess on my floor. So me being lazy, not wanting to clean my floor up, helps me keep my floor clean. Now, obviously it gets dirty, so I do clean it, but for the most part, try to work neat. It'll definitely help you in the long run. So what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna wait for this to taper off and level off. I'm not gonna keep you guys here watching with me. This could take several minutes. So I'll get back with you guys as soon as this thing is leveled out. Okay guys, so we're pretty much just about leveled off. As you can see, there's not a whole lot of fluid really coming at me anymore. So what we're gonna do is line up our oil catch pan underneath here a little bit better. And we're slowly gonna remove the remaining bolts. Now we are going to get a little bit more and more coming out as we do this. Now we will be getting more and more out as we do this. So you want to be careful. So now on my last two bolts, guys, as you guys saw, I just loosened them very little bit and you can see more and more fluid is coming out. So I'm gonna give it a second here and it looks like there's not a whole lot left there anymore. So what I'm gonna do is go ahead and remove one of the two that's left. And then with my hand, I'm gonna hold up the oil pan as I remove the last remaining bolt. Now, you gotta be quick here not to drop anything, but what we're gonna do is just slowly drop this once we get a good grip on it. Sometimes you'll make a mess, sometimes you won't. In this case, we really didn't make too much of a mess. We went ahead and we got the pan down. So now everything's gonna just drip here for a little bit. The next step that I like to do is remove my filter. So what we're gonna do here, and you can see this filter is pretty long. We're just gonna grab it and we're just gonna slowly and carefully do that. And now you wanna be careful because you will get some extra fluid coming out of there. And if you notice, we got our filter off, but on this filter, there's supposed to be a little collar here, like a little O-ring that's currently stuck up there. Okay guys, welcome back. So I got you guys repositioned. You can clearly see here where we have an O-ring that was stuck in there. Now these usually stay in there after you remove the filter. The plastic just kind of sticks to the inside of the housing. So what we're gonna need is a tool like this. This is called a seal puller. Now you guys gotta be very careful when using this. You're not going in there and just ripping it into shreds. You're not trying to do any damage to that housing. So what you're gonna wanna do basically is just put it up here, is what I like to do. And then when I hook it, I just basically pull down. And as you guys can clearly see, that seal came out now. It's a little bit difficult to not gouge it a little bit. We got a little bit of a lip there that I'm gonna go ahead and take care of with my little buffing wheel. Just a little bit of a scratch. And then here's our ring. We basically got this off. Okay guys, so you guys just saw me cleaning up the surface areas of the transmission. Now, I'm not gonna grind or do anything on these areas because these areas are actually pretty clean. And the gasket that GM gives you on here originally is actually reusable, and it's like a double O-ring design that I prefer to reuse. When you get your transmission kits, they give you this cheap rubber gasket. Now, this doesn't really offer too much protection, but I know these GM ones are reusable. And this vehicle only has 50,000 miles on it regardless of the age of the vehicle. So I'm going to go ahead and reuse the original one. I'm just going to clean it up. But in the meantime, like I said, I'm not going to be doing anything with these surfaces. They're already really clean. No need to grind. You definitely do not want to take your grinder to any of these surfaces, because if you grind too much off, you will damage it. At best, a razor blade to clean it or a specialized little tool to clean them. They make carbide bits that do clean these up, I believe. But again, you got to be careful. It's aluminum. It scratches really easily. So what I have now here basically is I'm going to reinstall the new seal for the oil filter housing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab a little bit of oil just to lubricate my area. And then what we're going to do is basically just firmly press it. Make sure we get it straight in there. And I gotta go get a tool to get that further in there, so give me a second guys and I'll be right back with you with the tool. Okay guys, so I decided to change the angle of the installation of this so you guys can see what I'm doing. So what I did was I cleaned up my surface area. What I gave it a little bit of a scratcher when I removed the old one. I just took a little bit of a Scotch-Brite pad and cleaned it up. What I did afterwards, I cleaned everything up with brake cleaner, got all my oil and residue and anything grit out of there. And then what I did was I put a little bit of light coating of transmission oil and I firmly pushed my seal in. Now, I still have a long ways to go. Now, some people do these differently. They just usually take a hammer and they just go tap, tap, tap until they get it in. Basically, the way some people do is they go here and they'll just go tap, 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 tap all around until it's pretty much flush. That method doesn't work, however. I don't like doing that just in the off chance of me damaging something. So I have a kit that I typically use on these. It's a small seal driver set, and let me get the correct size here for you guys. So I believe this is the size that I would be needing. I'm gonna go a little bit bigger just to play it safe, because I do have a lot of room there. So I just went up one size on this, guys. So what we're gonna do basically is now we've already installed it in there with our fingers as level as we can. And then you put the tool on there and just tap it in. Now as you tap, you want to make sure you're even. You'll notice that it changes noise when you're fully bottomed out. So that noise right there just went from a hollow to a thud. That tells me we're installed correctly. And what you always want to do is just check your spacing. I run my fingernail across here. I just make sure that everything is good, and it looks like we are good on this one. So I'm gonna get you guys repositioned for the next stage. Okay guys, welcome back. So what we're gonna do in the next step right now is we're going to install our filter. So the way that I like to do this is basically I like to get a little bit of oil. Now this thing's plenty full of oil, so just a little bit, and we're just going to add some oil to the new seal. And we're also going to be adding some oil to where the filter mates up to the seal. This will just help everything slide in together. And now this filter is plastic. You don't want to go crazy with it. What you want to do is just gently push it in there and you will feel it bottom out. Now for this particular car, there's no real way of knowing how deep you're in there. just because this thing doesn't have any sort of reference point. So what you basically do is just line it up the best you can, make sure you're fully seated, and once you're fully seated, pretty much just leave it at that. Now when the pan is on, it does have these little nodes or whatever you want to call these. That will help keep it up. So you just got to make sure that you are good up here essentially, and that you have it lined up somewhat over here. Okay guys, so the next step in this is the oil pan. This is the gasket that I was talking about. As you guys can see, this one has like a double O-ring design. Now I tried getting a original one for this one because, like I said earlier, the ones that come with the kits, they are very cheap and cheesily made. Essentially, this is what you get when you get a trans kit versus the one that you have originally from the dealer. You can see this thing is sturdy, so these can be reused. They have a double seal design here. So what I'm going to do is take a rag and brake cleaner, and I'm going to be cleaning up this seal, and I'm going to be reusing it. I trust this seal more than I would this. This is guaranteed to come back leaking, whereas at least with this one, I know it's going to seal. And guess what? If it does come back leaking, then you know what? I'll have at least some time to order the gasket from GM. I just wasn't able to get it on time. So what we're gonna do is reuse that one, and I'll be honest with you guys, I've reused these quite a few times on other products and GM vehicles, and they work. They really don't leak. If you're reusing them once or twice, usually you'll be okay. Once, I know you'll be good. Twice, you may get away with it, but I've never gone more than twice. So the next step now is to remove the magnet. As you guys can clearly see here, the magnet is filled up with a bunch of debris, as you guys can see right there. So I like to remove that and get that out of the way, because we're going to be cleaning that to get all the material off of it. And we're going to be removing our oil pan gasket here, because we're going to need to put this to the side to clean it up. And what I'm going to do next is just basically wash down my whole pan. My method is brake cleaner. I don't really have to prepare any surfaces here. As you guys can see, these areas are nicely clean. Maybe I'm just gonna take a razor blade and clean them off. But essentially what I do is razor blade, clean everything off, brake clean everything, get everything nice and clean, and then I dry it. And then that'll basically be the pan prep for this part of it. Okay guys, welcome back. So I went ahead and I cleaned up the oil pan and everything. As you guys can see here, nice and shiny. Got the magnet cleaned up, everything is ready to go. So now what we're going to be doing is bolting it back up. So the way I do this is you want to have 1 or 2 bolts in your hand, and what you're going to do is in one hand you're going to be pushing it up here just like so. Now this oil pan has these little like tabs here on the gasket that'll help line you up and keep you in place. So I got the front one set in there. Now I just got the rear one in. And what you want to do is put 1 or 2 bolts just to help support it, to keep it up here sturdy. You don't really have to put too many in there, just enough to hold it up. So what I do is I just keep holding it. I got about 3 in here right now that I'm going to be setting into place. And after I get 3 in there, what I do is I just lightly push them up there with my gun. Now, you don't want to crank on these like crazy. These do have a torque. I haven't looked it up yet. I normally do all my torquing off camera just because, you know, no one really wants to see me torque, what, 20 or 15 individual bolts. It's all pretty much the same. Okay guys, so as you can see, I went ahead and I torqued all my bolts on here. I cleaned the pan. Now, it's not as clean as I want it to be. It will be cleaner. I'm just gonna wait till I finish the whole service. And this car is actually going to be getting whole engine degreasing, where I basically degrease the motor from top to bottom, just make it nice and clean, so that way the customer knows there's no more leaks. Okay guys, so now we're up top. Essentially what I've done is I've taken my little funnel and I put it in the filler hole. What I'm going to do is I'm going to dump a couple quarts of transmission oil up here while I have that oil drain plug removed there to check the level of the transmission. Basically, I'm going to throw a couple bottles in there and see if I start getting any oil coming out of that plug like it should be. Okay guys, so we've added a couple quarts of transmission fluid, and what we got to do next is we got to reinstall the intake. So we're gonna take the intake and we're just gonna put this back on. And just so you guys know, I looked up the procedure while I was filling it up with some fluid. Essentially what we're supposed to do is fill it up with a few quarts, and then what you're supposed to do is operate the car. And when I say operate, I mean basically leave it idle, let the engine and transmission warm up. You want to cycle it through the gears up and down, you know, through drive, neutral, reverse, so that way the fluid has a chance to get throughout the transmission and cycle through the clutch packs. And once you do that, the GM service manual says that you're supposed to open up the bottom plug while the engine is running. And what happens in that instance is basically you're looking for transmission fluid to start dribbling out little by little. And once it stops dribbling out, essentially that would mean that your transmission is full. In the case that it doesn't dribble out, what they recommend is that you fill up in increments of half a quart at a time until the fluid starts running out. Okay guys, so we filled up the transmission fluid. We have enough quarts in there. What we did next was we let the engine idle. Now you got to get this transmission at least to 104 degrees before you remove the plug to check the fill level. So what I'm going to do next is I've already gotten up to my operating temperature. I'm going to remove this plug now. Let me move my light in case we get some oil spilling here, because I'm expecting this to leak out. Okay guys, I'm back, and I just got to make a quick note and a quick change here. So I was using one of my softwares that tells me specs on vehicles and gives me procedures. However, in this case, that system failed me. They had the incorrect information. So I initially told you guys that this plug right here, right on the bottom of the transmission cooler lines that we just replaced, was the one that you're supposed to loosen to be able to check the fluid level. However, I was wrong. The one that you're supposed to remove is the one back here. That's right above, or right about where the axle shaft meets the transmission. Basically a little bit farther back from the engine oil pan, straight ahead, you'll see it. You'll see in the last clip, I removed this one, and what initially happened was a bunch of fluid came out squirting, hence that's why the car is dripping in water right now. I had to degrease the whole frame. This one I believe is the pressure check for the transmission. So I just wanted to point that out, that we all make mistakes. In this case, I did make a mistake. However, I was getting the wrong information, but I had a gut feeling it was incorrect, because I've done this on other models before, and you know, they never really spewed out the oil like crazy. So I just wanted to make that as a note. We all make mistakes, guys. Just double check and make sure, especially when you're working on customer vehicles, because if I had let this go down the road, this transmission would have been very low on fluid.